Coming off the Tuesday elections, as we talked about yesterday, you had the Kansas City Public Schools get a $500 million in infrastructure funding. And then, of course, you also had the public safety sales tax get extended for another 20 years, which will include the building of a new jail downtown. Mayor Quinton Lucas is here on KCMO. Mr. Mayor, let's start with this. I had some folks who called in Monday, Tuesday, reached out and said, hey, I voted against this because there was nothing in the ballot language that said the money would be used towards a jail. So what would you say to those who are concerned about that and guaranteeing this money will be going to the building of a jail facility downtown?
So we'll just say again and again, this money will be used for a jail. We use the same ballot language question that we used in the prior two public safety sales tax votes. Anybody who had done the public work, or if the media wanted to report on it, 2002, 2010, I believe, and then this year, used pretty much the exact same language. It's an infrastructure sales tax. There's Missouri state law that helps define how we lay it all out and what it is we're doing. But like everything in government, if you vote on an earnings tax, for example, each year, right, we will tell you what we're spending it on, but you don't have those specifics in the ballot language itself. It frankly allows us to do, I think, a lot more on public safety and other items. There will be a decent amount of funds that are left over beyond the jail. We've already talked to KCPD, KCFD, and others about what they're thinking about for the future of their public safety needs. This allows us to address those.
All right. So what is the process now at City Hall? You know you're going to have the money for another 20 years. What's the timeline on getting whatever it's going to require, ordinance or whatever else, to break ground on this jail?
You need somebody to build it. So right now we're already going through a request for proposal process where we're evaluating, or I think beginning our listing of potential requirements, all those sorts of things, qualifications for those who will build the jail facility itself. It will then be a process of us getting the materials, the people, we have the location, and ensuring we have that work ready to get done. I'm proud of Kansas City. I think Kansas Cityans have said for years they want safer streets, they want better schools. And most Kansas Cityans, including the Northland that had school bond issues, voted for both. And I think this means that we will be able to get moving. I know there are some, typically who tag me on social media, who say, hey, we want it built today. The city does not build jails itself. We do need somebody to work with us in terms of building it, constructing it, designing it. That work has already started in making sure we're ready on the RFP process.
Did any part of you over the last couple of days when that passed and most of the city council, I think it was only one member who came out against the building of a jail downtown, think about where we were in this town and frankly in this country about 5 years ago when there was a push to basically not have jails, defund police, and now here we are in Kansas City, still a left of center city, and you know what? 60% of the voters said, yeah, give me that jail downtown. What does that tell you in terms of where we've gone from 4.5 years ago to today?
I think certainly there are a few interesting observations. The mayor's race in St. Louis perhaps being more aligned with kind of where people are. There you had a mayor elected 4 years ago, largely on a lot of those progressive themes. The city goes a pretty opposite direction in suggesting, well, maybe things are different. What I would say for Kansas City is this. Yes, there are a number of people. Indeed, one of the organizations that was actively opposed is decarcerate KC. I believe their viewpoint, as you could tell from their name, is that there should not be a carceral state in some ways as they see it. I don't know if that was ever quite the majority viewpoint or even a popular political viewpoint in Kansas City. Something I've said to the cows come home is that it's regrettable that Jackson County and Kansas City never came to an understanding or relationship on building that joint facility that can provide cost savings. During my time in office, which has now been a little while, I think we spent a lot of our years trying to say, how do we, frankly, come up with a better cost metric for the people of Kansas City? For any number of different reasons. I would argue intransigence from our partners at the county level, but perhaps there are other views that they see it as. We never got there. And I think that's where we spent a lot of time, maybe arguably too much, in terms of the jail issue. I don't think at any point there was ever a real confident viewpoint in Kansas City that no one would ever be arrested again for the underlying offenses at issue. There are real points that suggest that if you strangle your spouse or your girlfriend, then you should actually be tried in Jackson County Circuit Court. I appreciate the new county prosecutor that at least is suggesting that that is a change that's going to come. That's necessary. I think if you're a recidivist thief or others, frankly, that should get you to the felony level, largely in Jackson County Circuit Court. So there have been a lot more kind of internal issues than I think anyone of some real credible viewpoint saying that there should be no jails, there should be no enforcement. I think we've all wanted to say we can do better.
Mayor Quinton Lucas is here on KCMO 95.7 FM. Now, I also want to ask you, speaking of Jackson County, about something we touched on last week, but, obviously the news cycle has progressed since this point. You've got a county legislature that voted this week to comply with the Missouri State Tax Commission and roll these assessments from 2 years ago down to a maximum of 15%. You said last week the city will comply. The county, at least the executive, has not guaranteed that he will comply. So how are you supposed to, as a mayor, figure out what budgets are going to be for key institutions in the city without having any idea what these assessments are going to be from 2 years ago, never mind this year, and as a result, having no idea what the property taxes are going to be for private citizens and then also commercial properties? I mean, it just feels like a big mess when you're trying to put together a budget.
Can it just be time that our long national nightmare come to an end? And I'm suggesting it is the Jackson County property tax issue. First of all, let's just go through some steps. I have lost cases and won them, but at every level in Missouri courts and some federal courts. When we had a police funding dispute, and the Jackson County Circuit judge, by the way, said, hey, this is the way this needs to be read. City, we disagree with you. We evaluated appealing, but we complied from the moment the order was issued and continued to comply. We ultimately, for a number of reasons that I thought were valid, did not appeal that decision. But that's the way these sorts of things work, that the court speaks and then you comply, and then to the extent you have differences, right, you can litigate those going forward. I'm starting to lose understanding, frankly, of what it is that we're doing here. And yes, I know there's a right to appeal, but I would hope that if that is done, that is something that is done expeditiously, but at the same time, you have a judicial decision, one with the force of law that says, y'all got to follow these rules. And I just see it that way. I think the people of Jackson County, I'm one, 720,000 others are, I think just want some clarity once and for all for this. All of the jurisdictions, and I think about all of the others that are much smaller than my own, do want some clarity as to how we're doing collections. The schools, there are so many that are going to be an important part of this. So, I certainly hope that whatever comes out of Jackson County, it comes to some level of resolution. We have talked about this forever and a day, and I hope that ultimately the court decision, I tend to believe in what the courts have to say. I think hopefully that's followed long term.
Well, and you do have, interestingly, a bipartisan group that voted against the majority on Monday to basically comply with this Missouri State Tax Commission. So it's a fascinating time right now. But when you're trying to put together your budget, how do you do that when you, I guess, don't know how a portion of your revenues are going to look when it comes to property taxes that you collect from homeowners and businesses?
I think there's been a lot of chat about DOGE over the weeks, and I disagree strongly with how they're doing it. But, yeah, it leads fundamentally to inefficiency. So think about it this way. If we're all just passing budgets kind of saying, I assume it'll all be there, then what you end up getting in a position in often is saying that, I have to defend collecting that same high amount of dollars each time around. And then you likely are just kind of rubber stamping an ongoing continuation of the same government funds. As compared to if somebody were to tell you, all right, next year you need to figure out and do estimates that are based on a reduced share. This is what you do. You figure out what programs you may need to address, staffing issues, all those sorts of things in advance. It does not lead to responsible budgeting, and ultimately it doesn't lead to more responsible government for people in different Jackson County jurisdictions. And so I do think that this is something that is important for us to resolve. It is not merely academic, and it is not the sort of thing that I hope goes on for another year where we're talking about it all again. Look, there are a few issues, and I'm glad about this week's election. I will note this is an undefeated streak for this mayor and their team. But a few issues in our region we need to be able to stop talking about. One, Jackson County property tax collections. The court has stepped in. Hopefully there's a quick resolution. Even if it needs to be appealed immediately to the Missouri Supreme Court, I hope it's done. I hope stadiums are something that by the summer we never have to talk about again in our lives. And frankly, we've been kicking around this local jail, all the local jails issues for years. My goal is that we resolve all of these. We get to move on to new, more interesting things about how we build and grow our community, and hopefully this decision is a step in that direction.
I just picked up on something you said there. Now, undefeated streak. Now, listen, no one's going to deny you've had a very good run. You won 2 elections, but you did back the stadium tax that failed last year. So are you counting that as a loss or no?
Absolutely not. That wasn't a city issue.
I thought you might go, okay, I got it.
When we put some on the ballot, look, there are people I've supported who've lost that issue, Kamala Harris, a lot of others. But when we put an issue on the ballot in Kansas City, or when I've been on, it has been a yes vote time and time again. It will continue to be this way because we have, I think, a good connection to the people of Kansas City, and we'll look forward to keep doing that over the years.
All right. I just wanted to clarify that part of how we are defining undefeated. Fair enough. Okay, I got you there. Now, last thing I've got for you here. You guys voted as a city council last week to reinstate $2 bus fares for most Kansas Cityans. Is this an admission that free bus fare was a failure, or is this the KCATA not knowing how to properly budget their monies?
The latter. No. So first of all, I think the zero fare transit enterprise has not been a failure. Case in point, the streetcar system continues to be zero fare. What we passed last week was a direction to evaluate the reinstitution of fares for those who can afford them, but actually continuing to provide free fares for the many people who ride our buses who cannot. So really the core of our program remains. It just means that well-heeled people like you and I perhaps still have to, will have to start paying bus fares again. I don't love it entirely, but I think this still allows us to do what we were trying to do to make sure that people who were telling each day, go get a job, go try to figure out something great in your life, have the chance to do so. But I do absolutely think, look, you got an agency running around. I mean, Pete, we have so many regional authorities and all these sorts of things where fundamentally there ends up being no accountability. And this becomes one example, right? So they're saying there's a $30 to $40 million budget gap. Fares, even at their most robust coming back, generate, $10 million, if that. I think they're estimating $4 million this year. We haven't solved the problem. They haven't solved the problem. This is just kind of plucking, I think, what is the easiest to attack thing and say, yeah, maybe this is how we do it. But, yeah, this kind of throwing spaghetti at the wall approach to how you balance a budget isn't the sort of thing that's going to work long term. Some of it might be getting more support from the states of Missouri or Kansas. I know there's a claim for more federal support. I have no idea why they think that's going to come through. When you look at kind of federal budget conversations now, it's a problem, and it's a problem that certainly Kansas City government is interested in trying to help solve, but we're not going to help solve all of it, which is, you need to figure out how to address a $30 million budget gap and not just kind of say, all right, yeah, maybe a few dollars from broke people in Kansas City is going to be the way we do it, because it's not. And so I hope we get that figured out, but I do have administrative concerns going forward.
Mayor Lucas on KCMO. We always appreciate it, Mr. Mayor. Anything big and sexy on the agenda today that we need to be aware of?
Look, man, I'm just watching tariff policy like you are. It seems to change every day now. So I know there will be many listeners who say this has just been a brilliant strategy. I'm not sure I agree, but we're always caring about how this will impact how we do things in Kansas City, like building jails and other infrastructure, hoping the prices don't go up.
Lock in those rates when they look good. That's my only bit of advice. Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. We appreciate it.
Take care, everybody.
All right, there you go. That is Quinton Lucas, the mayor of Kansas City on KCMO Talk Radio.